Welcome. Good to geek out. Good place to geek out. Place where geeks go. Out. Editor coming out of San Antonio, Texas today. We are covering Siege, Transformers War for Cybertron Netflix series, episodes 3 and 4. So spoilers ahead, and realize we're not going past episode 4.
I'm Omar, coming from Gardena, and I'm also not going past episode 4.
Love your picture, Omar, by the way.
Thank you.
This is Rob, Boba Fresh from San Francisco, and we'll be reviewing episodes 3 and 4. And Ed, are we sure we're recording today?
Rob Lucy coming at you from Phoenix, Oregon. Excited to geek out. Let's go.
All right. So,
Man, can I introduce myself? I don't get to be a part of this. This is Greg Ellis coming from West Hills. Man, I might as well be the freaking record button the way Ed be forgetting about me.
oh, too soon, bro. Too soon.
Episode 3 really kind of solidified. It brought me into this universe. Episodes 1 and 2 kind of set the stage. 3 and 4 set it on its path. Very interesting to see the moral ambiguity from the outside perspective, looking at Megatron and Optimus Prime. From my perspective, I think Optimus Prime is more the evil one here, even though he sounds good and all that. Megatron seems to be taking the higher road. What do you guys think about that?
Evil is a strong word. I would say Optimus definitely takes the position of the minority as far as his decisions regarding what he plans to do with the Allspark. It's interesting, Impactor's comments about the Autobots sipping Energon behind their gilded walls, and how the Decepticons were some sort of these serfs who were in the mines while the Autobots were not. You weren't down in the mines with me and Megatron. I believe that's what he told Optimus. So it is kind of a different take on the relationship between the Autobots and the Decepticons, where it kind of makes the Autobots these bureaucratic douchebags. You know what I'm saying? And so it makes you question some of Optimus's decisions now.
It almost comes across as like the Autobots were having dinner parties and Decepticons had to serve them their champagne. It's the way it's like we've just been neat.
Pinky out.
Right.
What I was impressed with in that idea of world building and how what you were saying about the Autobots, the showing of the cost of war. Like, one of the big things that was interesting to me in the first episode, and I was like, oh shit, they just killed that dude. Like, that Seeker is dead. And so it's very easy to just throw away a murder because it's in battle. So it's, it's a fucking casualty of war. But it's interesting when they really kind of explore all the wounded Autobots and Decepticons being taken being taken care of together, and just like what that neutral space ends up meaning. And almost to Lucy's point in what you're saying about evil, like, it's not that it's evil as much as he's just going to extremes. And when anyone goes to an extreme, they just lose reason and they lose logic. And as soon as you lose the ability to reason with somebody, I mean, that's not necessarily evil, but like when you're so implacable that you're not going to change your path, or you're not going to like listen to your right-hand woman who's like, yo, every move you are making is a dumb move. And she has to like justify and convince herself like, all right, well, I guess it's the right tactical decision, but I swear to God, this is stupid.
Yeah, I can't help but make parallels to our current political situation, where everybody is on the extremes, like Optimus Prime is ready to burn the planet down to the ground, so his people don't become, they don't become reprogrammed. Like Alita literally says, the old religion says if we remove the Allspark, the planet is dead. And Optimus is like, well, that's a risk I'm going to have to take. And, Megatron is like, well, they ain't falling in line, so I'm going to use the Allspark to mind wipe them.
The imagery is perfect because if you think about it, like when you were saying Optimus comes off as almost the evil one, but if it was like there are two two opposite ends of the spectrum, but they're both coming closer to each other because
they originate from the same place.
Yes,
Right.
but what I mean, like, because Megatron was getting worse and worse as the episode went, and it was okay. He's losing that nobleness that they almost gave him from the beginning, and then Optimus actually, we were doubting him, but you start to see his decisions are right. So it's like they started out with these with a view of who they are and who you may think they are, but then it comes clearer as it goes.
And I think that lends into when specifically are using the word faction and what's the Alpha Centurion? Who's their boy?
Alpha Triangle.
Alpha Trion. It reminds me of Jefferson and the splitting of factions, and Alpha Trion would be George Washington, and these are the splitting of the party because George Washington didn't want. There was supposed to be one party. There was supposed to be one ideology that was behind a trusted leader, and then you had everything split off into factions, and we've lived in a bipartisan system ever since. And so I think again, the metaphors that it's interesting the levels of metaphors that they're using, and is it up to us that we can't help but put our views of what's happening on the world on top of it, or are they doing it intentionally because they are wishy-washy, it seems, on who would be a direct allegory for anyone, which is a really interesting way that they're kind of playing it up.
I mean, well, okay. Hold on. If you go metaphor perspective, and there's a lot of yin and yang, and if you have Optimus and Megatron kind of going between the light and the dark, or whatever you want to say, and you guys have already talked about Bumblebee being kind of in the middle of the road, so he would be like the Autobot version, and then going to what Omar talked about in our last episode, which was that Starscream is poisoning Megatron's mind slowly but surely. So if Bumblebee is the apathetic one that's trying to not get pulled in, Starscream is the antithesis of that, which is not really 100% on board, but trying to poison everything along the way. And so it's definitely very systematically done. That's all I would say. And like anything that comes out of that is definitely purposeful and intended. And proof of that is Starscream is against reprogramming the Autobots just because he wants to defeat them and basically put them under the ground.
Yeah, he doesn't want to control them. He wants to get rid of them.
Yeah, Megatron's more like, we need a people to rule.
Which is a cool difference for Starscream, because Starscream is always framed as such a whiny, ambitious character, and kind of made two-dimensional in that way. And not to say that he's not extremely ambitious and backstabbing in this one, but the fact that they put this warrior code on him, the fact that they give him this extra level of being a badass, and again, like, everyone doesn't want the Autobots wiped out for some reason. So when that decision is coming to a crux, like every different faction has their own reason. Go on.
What about the fact that they keep on both sides referring to it as Optimus's war, as though, you know what I'm saying, this is the revolution is on him. Mm-hmm. There's a part where he's bringing the idea about the space bridge to Ratchet, and Ratchet was like, so that you can take your war to other planets as well. And like when he said that, it hit me. I'm like, oh man, they keep referring to this as Optimus's war, and I was like, that is definitely a new take on this, because you never really see it as Optimus's war, as like, going back to Hanna-Barbera and Mattel and all that. They weren't making it like Optimus was the reason why they had to leave Cybertron because he started some sort of a revolution. It was Decepticons were taking over, and Optimus was rebelling, right? He wasn't revolting, he was rebelling.
But I think that there's also, like, when it comes down to the Tryon, maybe it's Optimus's war in the sense that Optimus has that leadership ability. Like, him, Ultra Magnus, and Megatron all have some aspect of what it is to be a leader, what it is to be in control. So Optimus's ownership of the war, it's this weird thing, because yes, it's a bad war, but if it's done for the cause of freedom, like someone's war is another person's revolution. And so the way that they've done a good job in framing the concept of propaganda, because none of this is really incongruent with Hanna-Barbera, G1, is with a lot of exceptions, but mainly design-wise. But the way that the story goes and sets up, I think, is to make you on that side. Like, we're never on the Empire side, like, we're never on board with Darth Vader. And they do a good job making not just Megatron, but the entire Decepticon cause a sympathetic one.
Yeah. I guess if there's one, like, since we're not like really going chronologically about these episodes, if there's one thing you can pull away from these episodes, is that it's making the viewer question what they align with or what they don't, what is quote unquote right, what is quote unquote wrong. You see Megatron being altruistic and then allowing Ultra Magnus to be tortured by Shockwave.
Altruism.
He kept crossing line after line, and each line he could never go back.
I would also like to give a shout out to Ratchet for undermining the term Ratchet these days with his
But the interesting thing is Jetfire, and I remember that Impactor is the same one, but no one is, when Jetfire turns, he shows free will. So no one is forced to be a Decepticon. No one is forced to be an Autobot. They have this predisposition to be either. So I think it's interesting that the way that they flex that concept of free will in this episode, because G1 is like, oh, you're bad. Right. And in the way that they flip the Jetfire story to integrate into this story, I think, again, does that good job of what is free will and what is duty.
And actually, that's perfect, because what we were talking about earlier, which was everything's polarized now, right? The right and the left growing farther and farther apart. And you take Jetfire, who was a centrist, and the farther right that Megatron went, he got pulled away from the Decepticons because he was going more and more extreme. And Jetfire was like, no, this is not what I'm doing. And it was like, okay, I'm okay with this while we're doing it like this. But if you keep going farther and farther onto the dark side, I can't follow you there.
Because the question was, Jetfire, why would you come over to help the Autobots? And his quote was, because Megatron has fallen into darkness.
The power of, and that goes into this concept of what is the power of leadership? What does a leader do if they don't do righteous things with the people that they have and the sway that they have? And they do a good job in regards to having that free will, because Ratchet's got his free will, Bumblebee's got his free will. But as Megatron and Optimus Prime both slip into extremes, everyone underneath them slips into that same extreme. And we don't question their slipping into the extreme because they're following orders. Like, so it gets into that I was just following orders, Nuremberg thing. And it's, again, like, it makes for a good story. I thought it was interesting that Impactor and Jetfire left. I was almost thinking that Alita would go to the Decepticons because she's like, Optimus, you're ready to burn this whole thing down? Like, I'm not behind that, but you're the guy. And, it plays into the original G1 storyline where, they follow out. But, nobody has left the Autobots to go to the Decepticons. We've had a couple of Decepticons, change sides. But you could go either way. You could really
I think they're still smart enough to understand that the Decepticon way is not one of compassion. So, you know what I mean? Where the Autobots are willing to accept Impactor and Jetfire, I can't imagine Alita goes to the Decepticons and is received well.
You know, in a way, the devil's advocate, like Megatron is like, I'm not here to kill them. I'm just going to reprogram them and let them live. You know, that's his thing. And Optimus is like, I'm going to risk destroying the entire planet.
And I think that they really do a great job throwing Alita into that mix, because this whole concept is of what is evil? Is it good people standing by when evil's being done?
So, like, if we're gonna get out of the ideology of these episodes and everything, we talk about the things that like happened towards the end.
I don't remember them.
we kind of. I only think in big ideas. I don't speak gossip. That Starscream takes control of the Seekers, which we kind of have already touched on. And then,
that's after
Jetfire leaves.
We already talked about Jetfire.
Starscream gets control, but I think the bigger thing is when but Bumblebee gets the knowledge, and he's the one that changes things significantly.
And then
we're going on to episode 5 now. I think after episode.
Yeah, we're at the end of 4, but then I think also the fact I want to bring up besides the Bumblebee.
That's still 4.
Yeah, is that you can't have the Matrix and have the chosen 5.
Well,
so, like,
you could, but they just chose not to.
I don't think you're allowed to have both. I don't know what would happen to you. I assume it's like the U.S. government.
But didn't Alpha Trion say to tell Bumblebee like they chose to split it up?
Yes.
Like, they just so it sounded like
he told him they chose.
Yeah.
He said they agreed that one Cybertronian shouldn't have all the power, so they agreed to share the power. Ultra Magnus would get the protocols, and Optimus would get the Matrix of leadership.
What do you call that in government? Something checks and balances.
Oh, checks and balances.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Weird for
It
robots.
it is not a good checks and balance system.
Yeah, right. The Autobots do it.
It's an attempt.
But I also like that we see the brutality of the Decepticons also in this one, because this is the one with the Decepticons having the Autobots all on the spikes on the pikes, while Mirage is out there, and that's raw, like that's not just shooting a person in the heat of battle, like you are picking them up, and you fashioned these spikes because they have to have a T-bar at some point, because otherwise it would fall all the way to the ground. So like they're designing pikes to impale Autobots on, and that's kind of evil. That's kind of hard.
Vlad Tepish.
Yeah.
Omar, let me I guess the last question before we close out. I was going to say something. Your favorite Transformer last time we did this was Jetfire. So how do you feel at the end when you see him doing what he does, turning himself over to the Autobots? Like, how'd that make you feel?
I mean, for me, that was the moment I was waiting for, because it was like I wanted to see how that happened, because they had never touched on that part. But you knew in his history, he was the Decepticon who became an Autobot. So for me, that was a cool thing, especially when you see how they did it with the storyline and how it was an actual progression, and it made sense.
He killed Skywarp.
Yeah, well, he wasn't. He couldn't have Skywarp going back snitching.
I mean, he shot him just enough to allow him to say a few words.
Yeah, he said a couple things, and then he had to go away.
Yeah. All right, wait. Before we leave episode 4, I didn't go back and do my research on this because I thought this would be a good discussion topic. But the Guardians and the fact that they wouldn't help, they won't get involved. What do you guys think about that?
The Asgardians are a bunch of hoes.
I thought it was interesting that Optimus was like, "Hey, he's gonna use the spark of life or the Allspark to mind wipe us and like change our programming," but he failed to mention that he was gonna take the Allspark off of Cybertron. He left that out of there, and I wonder if the Guardians would have a different perspective on,
or whether they knew
guarding Cybertron and taking the Allspark out of there.
I imagine they knew. That's a great point, Lucy. That was also the main way he was able to calm down Alita was to assure her that, oh, I'm going to the Guardians. They're gonna help. They're gonna give me advice to make sure that, what we do when I take the Allspark off the planet, maybe it won't wipe out everybody.
But I hear what Ed's also saying in regards to, we had spoken about the ones who are above, and Thor and Walt Simonson's and the Asgardians having gods. Like, what happens when your gods have gods? Who does God pray to? And they do a cool job interjecting that, and it's weird because like the Jetfire storyline matters. Like everything that they put in matters. There's not a lot of waste or filler or repeat imagery that comes in here. So to put in the Guardians as this like larger than life nigh religious fascination.
They're like deities. They're kind of like deities.
And I'm like,
that's right.
Like I get that you don't want to get in the squabbles, but the Allspark's going to go off the planet and literally get destroyed. Do you not want to have a conversation about this? Do you not want like this is where you live too, right? Like, right?
Yeah.
And that was my point about that. Like, like he says one thing, but he's also willing to roll a 50-50, flip a quarter on whether Cybertron is gone if he takes the Allspark off planet.
But that's what
Episode 5. Dun dun dun.
It's a king to a god. It's a god to a non-believer who don't believe in.
You guys, anything else? Any points anyone wants to add before we close up?
roll out.
Pull out.
Yeah, I'm always going to think about that.
All right. On that note, Transformers Siege episodes 3 and 4 covered. Can't wait to finish them off with 5 and 6 with these guys. It's been very metaphorical this episode. Editor closing out San Antonio, and I also like to say I don't understand all the vitriol towards this series online, on Twitter and everything, because if you like Gen 1 and you think that's entertaining, how do you not enjoy this? What's wrong with you? Stop arguing to argue. Enjoy life.
Ooh, vitriol. Nice use of words.
You speak so well.
This is Greg Ellis, West Hills, California, signing off. One thing that we didn't talk about that I thought was dope was I think Alpha Trion went out real G-like and with a smile. He was definitely smiling when they killed him. He knew exactly what he was doing. That was super dope.
This is Omar from Gardena, and I will literally see you guys in 1 minute. I'm out.
This is Boba Fresh from San Francisco. Thank you for checking in. Roll out. Pull out.
Rob, Loose Dog Lucy coming at you from Phoenix, Oregon. Had a great conversation. Loved it. Let's hear what your guys' opinions are online. Like, comment, subscribe. Love hearing from anybody else in the geek community. Good to geek out. Peace.